My name is April Friges. I am an artist, and in terms of what medium I work with, I usually revolve around photography and sculpture, and I also do a little bit of performance and 16mm film. When people ask me, what do? I always say I'm an artist. If I say that I'm a photographer, they'll say, oh, do you shoot weddings, or do you take baby pictures? What does your photography look like? And usually, they can't even grasp where, that it's, these giant 50-inch by 9 or 10 feet things that are abstract and shown in a gallery. So usually I'll just say I'm an artist. And then when they ask me what type of medium I work with, then I'll say photography and sculpture. Usually they don't put it together, but I can usually blend it a little bit easier by saying it in that direction rather than saying I'm a photographer. I'm a teacher, and I'm also an artist. I like to think of them as 50-50, although teaching seems to always take the precedence over my time in the studio. I teach at Point Park University. I teach all the advanced levels of photography. So usually I'm helping students prepare for a world of an art career outside of Point Park. So all the senior thesis and exhibition held in my classes. Previously, I taught in California. I've only been here for about a little over a year now. I started teaching at a school called the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, FIDM. Before I was in graduate school, I started teaching there in 2005. Then I went to UC Irvine for my master's, spent 3 years completing my master's. My thesis was 16mm film and performance that I did in a very small town in Newton, Iowa. Spent 8 years in LA, worked for many artists out there, so I sort of gained a lot of my footwork. Sort of the way that I make my work has definitely been inspired by some of the artists that I've worked for in terms of my process and the way that I think about the material. And most people that look at my work, they'll look at somebody like John Chamberlain. They'll refer to him. He's a sculptor and he works primarily with metal. So when they walk up to my work, they don't realize that it's a photograph because it's not an image. It's not depicting anything, but it's highly glossy and it resembles metal a lot of the time. So that's an artist who I think a lot of people refer to when they're trying to relate to the work, but then they realize that it's a photograph and then they don't really understand how it's made because where's the picture? And I really usually have to start from the very beginning and explain that it's made with chemicals, that it's made in a dark room, and that there's just no negative. It's just light sensitive paper. It's like a total cliche to say it, but luckily my hobby is the thing that is my profession. So I'm very fortunate in that I get to work around the medium of photography every day of my life and help students navigate their direction with the medium and my own direction. I think the best thing about being an artist is sort of like the freedom of a schedule. I can be in here late at night and sort of get to my work all by myself and nobody's bugging me. And the teaching career is great. It has more of a regimented schedule, which I'm really bad at. So I think that the art career is a little bit more freeing of that, and I get to, every day is different. And I think that's the same with teaching, but I usually know what I'm walking in with when I go to the classroom, whereas here it's I'll sit down and within an hour this whole thing will be completely different. So that's what I love about experimenting and being in the studio. So the title of my work is called Spectator, and it's not really about the spectator sport or looking at the work. I think the idea of the word spectator is more about the work itself, looking at the medium of photography and asking the question, what is photography today? The show itself sort of contemplates the idea of photography. I think that each piece that you look at of mine looks at the medium and says, what do we classify a photograph as? Is it two-dimensional, which is what we traditionally look at it as being? The frames themselves are not square frames. There's a couple, but only to sort of push the boundaries. I'm changing the shapes of the frame, I'm curving the work, I'm sculpting the work, and you start to look at it and think, possibly, is it a photograph? Is it a sculpture? Should be really interesting. It's going to have sculptures, freestanding sculptures, because I've been really pushing hard to get the photograph off of a wall, because we usually look at photographs on walls when they're hung in galleries. So I wanted to get beyond that. My frames aren't going to be your typical square frames. They're going to have really interesting shapes to them. And eventually, after the show, I'm going to start working with like porcelain and using my work to create objects to make them, but then there will be no photograph actually in it. So the light will be projected on, let's say, porcelain, and it'll have these really interesting shapes made from my work, but it'll be a pure sculpture and no photographic elements at all, besides the fact that it was made from a photograph.